pray for the guidance and renewal of the Holy Spirit. Jesus said, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you to all truth. So, Lord Jesus, your promise, and so we believe, open our hearts to receive the Spirit in all his gracious fullness, and make us sensitive to his guidance. We may know your mind and do your will, for your name's sake. Amen. Holy Spirit, Lord God, giver of life, come to us as refreshing and strengthening power. Purge out of our lives all that denies your inspiration. Keep us alert to your challenges. Let us respond to the new demands placed upon us by the COVID-19 pandemic. Give us humility. May see the vision and trusting your power. May commit ourselves to you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
You got minutes. Mm-hmm. This house is now in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Friday, 24th of April, 2020 to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that those minutes be deferred.
The questions are the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker.
The report of the Honor General for the year 2019.
Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Petitions, papers.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the annual reports and audited financial statements of the Grantley Adams International Airport, Inc. for the years ended March 31st, 2017 to March 31st, 2018. I'm also commanded to lay the audited financial statements of the Barbados Water Authority for the years ended March 31st, 2015 to March 31st, 2017. And also commanded to lay the report of the Judicial Appointments Committee, April 2019 to January 2020.
Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Income Tax Amendment Number 2 Bill 2020.
Questions at the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Supreme Court of Judicature Amendment Bill 2020.
Second, please.
Questions at the aforementioned bill.
Second, please.
The questions at the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2020.
The questions at the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All the honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Registration of Judgments Amendment Bill 2020.
Get off fight. Get off fight.
question is that the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Catastrophe Fund Bill 2020.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the
Second,
aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business.
Government business is now the order of the day.
Order number 19, sir. In the name of the Honourable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2020.
Honourable member for St. Joseph.
You sit there.
Mr. Speaker, there's another bill on the order paper which is connected to this one, and I therefore would like to ask if we could have a cognate debate. The two matters are inextricably intertwined. Orders 19 and 20.
The question is that order 19 and 20 we deemed a cognate debate because they are inextricably linked. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I don't propose to detain the chamber for a long time in relation to these two matters. By way of history, sir, we have a court system that in many respects has not made it effectively into the 21st century. There are a number of things that are readily embraced by the courts and by the practitioners of law in other jurisdictions that we have been somewhat slow to embrace. And we believe, Mr. Speaker, that there are opportunities for us to achieve far greater efficiencies in the judicial system than we currently have. Now, you might ask, sir, what does this have to do with the Stamp Duty or the Registration of Judgments Act? One of our administration's significant initiatives, Mr. Speaker, is the establishment of a regime for electronic filing of court documents. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the average Barbadian who has had any dealings with most court cases would be aware of the procedure involving affidavits, where you have to go to your lawyer, get the affidavit prepared. The legal clerk will then walk with you over to the registry, and you wait at the registry until a legal assistant becomes available. And then they put a Bible in your hand, you take the oath, and you sign that document. And then, sir, you go on your way, but the document then goes back to the particular lawyer's office until time for filing. And that requires often another trek to the registry to present the actual physical document for filing. Sir, in our modern era, in other jurisdictions, documents are filed electronically. I'm sure, sir, that as a person who has practiced before the Caribbean Court of Justice, you would immediately admit that nobody goes to a registry to have something signed, then to send it down to the CCJ for filing. All of the filing of the court document is done online. And yes, sir, while the CCJ has its seat in Trinidad, and we have a distance of 100 and something plus miles separating us, there is absolutely no reason why within our own jurisdiction we should be reluctant to embrace the concept of electronic filing. No, sir. Last year we made amendments to the Evidence Act so as to allow the taking of oaths by attorneys in their offices, so that we actually began this process some months ago, so that for some time you have not needed to go to the registry to get documents, to take affidavits anymore. You can do it in a lawyer's office. But the next step is the step of filing the document. Now, sir, the platform for e-filing is pretty much complete. But upon filing certain documents, you are required to pay stamp duty. And in the normal course of things, then you have to purchase what we used to call a writ, but there's now a claim form. You would actually have to affix a physical stamp onto that particular form. There are a whole set of things, sir, that filing requires you to put on revenue stamps. But it becomes impractical to have a system of filing things online while retaining the anachronistic practice of moistening a stamp, sticking it onto an original document, and then submitting it. So this amendment, sir, now permits the stamp duty to be affixed to the document electronically. That's all it does. It's allowing the registry to have a system of affixing the stamp duty on the document electronically. Now, sir, you could argue that we could just have gotten rid of the stamp duty altogether, but I suspect that the Revenue Authority of Barbados would be disinclined to give up yet another source of revenue. That is perhaps a discussion for another time. But for so long, sir, as we have a requirement that stamp duty be paid, then, sir, we always will have the challenge unless we amend the Stamp Duty Act. And this amendment is a very simple one. As I said, it allows revenue stamps to be affixed to the document electronically. Now, this perhaps opens a broader discussion that is not appropriate for today, but revenue stamps are attached to deeds, stamp duties are paid. We have a Stamp Duty Act, as we're amending it now, and physical stamps are attached to a whole set of documents. Well, for the longest time, sir, you could actually have gone to the Treasury, paid the stamp duty, and the Treasury would just put a little round stamp on it and said duty paid, and writing the amount of stamp duty that you paid without actually affixing any revenue stamps. So this is the completion of a circle or of a cycle, and it facilitates the legal system of Barbados moving swiftly towards a system of electronic filing. Now, sir, this will, I believe, not only create efficiencies, but help to reduce costs of transactions. Now, it isn't to say the stamp duty is no longer paid, but anytime it is paid, but anytime you make a system more efficient, minimize the amount of time that legal clerks have to go over to the registry and stand in line to file documents and so on, then, sir, you allow the system to function more effectively, speedily, and that will always have an impact on the cost equation. The other element, sir, is the registration of judgments. Registration of judgments, when a person gets a judgment, you complete a form, and you file it, you pay the filing fee, and you get a judgment registered. It's a paper-based process, sir. It's a paper-based process that doesn't really facilitate searching to see if judgments are registered against you. And this too, we can do more effectively. And this amendment to the Registration of Judgments Act will now allow the Registrar of the Supreme Court to maintain an electronic register of judgments. So, what is it that we're doing? We're trying to bring the administration of justice and at the same time the practice of law into a modern era. We're not reinventing the wheel, sir. All of these are things that are done and embraced by jurisdictions across the world. We regularly complain about the delays that are attendant with the judicial system. And while these amendments will not solve those problems, they will certainly allow for even the judges to work more effectively. One of the last cases I did, or one of the cases I did that we concluded not long before the last year election, sir, was a case which had thousands upon thousands of documentary evidence, hundreds of pages of affidavits. And sir, when we looked at the volume of documents that were in this case, it took about 7 boxes, sir. There's a special name for those boxes. What do you call them again? Not biscuit boxes. There's a special name for them, but special boxes that you use in your offices. About 7 or 8 boxes, sir, of evidence and of argument. Now, sir, a judge has to read every single one of those. And you would say to the judge, well, carry home the file. But that is the file, sir. With those 7 boxes of documentary evidence, that in effect becomes the file. How does a system effectively dispense justice when you have such a large bulk of paper to deal with? And you know, the irony, sir, is that those 7 boxes make up the court's file, and it stands to reason that the claimant's attorney will have the same 7 boxes, and the defendant's attorney will have the same 7 boxes. That must be about 12 trees that will have been cut down and converted to paper in one case. Then once we go the route of e-filing, sir, a judge will not have to contend with trying to put 7 boxes into the back of a vehicle to carry them home. All of the documentation in a court case, when once we go towards e-filing, will be on a memory stick. Now, sir, it doesn't take rocket science to recognize that this is an initiative that should be embraced by everyone, not just for environmental purposes, for convenience, for efficiency, and for speed of carrying out your activity. In this financial year, we've already issued, I think we had enough money to issue most of the judges with new, very powerful laptop computers. Our High Court has already long been outfitted to handle technology. And therefore, sir, we just have to put those last few things in place so that the delivery of justice can be brought into a modern era. Now we concede, sir, that the technology is just one side of things, and technology is still used by frail human beings. In another debate, I hope that we will have an opportunity to talk about the changes that we've made in the judicial system. Certainly the report of the Judicial Selection Committee is laid, and that is a reminder to the Chamber, sir, that in the last year we appointed additional judges to the High Court. We've put additional courtrooms in the High Court. We've done more to transform the practice of the administration of justice in the last 2 years, sir, than perhaps anybody in the 20 years before it. These things now have to be given an opportunity to yield fruit, but we can fail if we don't grasp the opportunity to do those small things, sir. I don't believe that there's anything more that I can add on this occasion. The system for e-filing was paid for in the last financial year, and we are just now completing the legislative things that will allow it to work. There's no point having an e-filing system which then still requires you to go and involve yourself in the archaic practice of licking a stamp and sticking it onto a document and then scanning it and so on. So we've gone to e-cabinet. I don't know the last day I signed a piece of paper, because for the most part the things that I signed are all done electronically. Those are the directions, sir, that the technology has taken us in, and we must not refuse or fail to seize the opportunity because of any timidity that we may have. I believe, sir, that in fact it's an irony that we are debating this issue in the time of COVID, because the last thing we want is for people to be having to trek over to the registry with or without face masks. Well, they can't get it unless they have on face masks. But the point I'm making is, sir, that every opportunity you have to minimize human contact is an opportunity to help to eliminate the spread of COVID-19. So e-filing now is happening at a time, sir, at a time when our system needs it most. A lot of the public servants that you engage with in the registry are certainly welcoming people, but we've reached a point where human contact is not what it used to be, and therefore implementing the system fully will go a long way towards allowing people to work remotely, and in fact even the payments for the filing of documents will be done electronically by EasyPay. So that works for revenue, because it means that the payments are made and immediately received, the accounting is all sorted out, but nobody will have to go and stand up at a cashier anymore with a check or with cash to pay to file documents. The entire thing is going to be seamless, sir. And I therefore commend both of these amendments to the Chamber. I reiterate, sir, that they are not the solution to the delays in the administration of justice, but they will certainly go a long way towards helping to make the system more efficient. It's not just affidavits in court cases that will be filed electronically. We're going to make sure that probate matters, applications for letters of administration, all of those kinds of things, applications for letters testamentary, just about anything which requires a judicial or registrar's intervention is going to be done in an electronic media. I welcome these initiatives, and I'm confident, sir, that over time we will begin to see a system that is working more efficiently, and at this point in time, sir, a system that is safer for all of us as we carry out our day-to-day activities. I'm much obliged to you. I'd like to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
I beg to second that, sir.
Question is that the honorable speaker do leave the chair and the House resolve itself into finance,
No, just committee.
into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
I'd like to move that clause 1 stand part.
Second that, sir.
Question is that clause 1 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
I'd like to move that clause 2 stand part.
Beg to second that, ma'am.
Question is that clause 2 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
I'd like to move that clause 3 stand part.
I beg to second that, ma'am.
Question is that clause 3 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
I'd like to move that clause 4 stand part.
Beg to second that, ma'am.
Question is that clause 4 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of 1 bill in committee.
Question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of 1 bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
That's all right.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of 1 bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Stamp Duty Amendment Act 2020.
Second that, ma'am.
Question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Order number 20, sir. In the name of the Honourable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Registration of Judgment Amendment Bill 2020.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
Beg to second that.
Question is that the speaker do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
Question is that clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
Question is that clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Chairman of Committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Registration of Judgments Amendment Act 2020.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Order number 16, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance, to move the second reading of the Catastrophe Fund Bill 2020.
Honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to introduce this bill before this Parliament, certainly in extraordinary circumstance facing not just Barbados, but certainly the world over. But before I get into the details, sir, let me provide an opportunity, let me take this opportunity to provide some context clearly for the country as to why we are making these particular amendments, and certainly to the Catastrophe Fund. As a matter of fact, sir, we are repealing the Catastrophe Fund Bill as currently constituted and reintroducing a completely new piece of legislation. But let me just, for absolute clarity, sir, through you to the country, sir, indicate that or remind citizens as to the genesis as to how the Catastrophe Fund was set up in the first instance. And as you are aware, sir, in 2007, under a previous Barbados Labour Party administration, this bill was introduced, and the purpose of it, sir, was designed to respond to a catastrophe caused by a natural disaster. And as was contemplated at that time, sir, natural disasters meant earthquakes, hurricanes, and other fires, other hazards, which we are pretty much familiar with that happens to countries. And that the intent of the catastrophe bill at that time, sir, was to provide financial assistance to those persons for whom might not have been at the time, sir, have had insurance to be able to rely on, and to allow for persons with their home values of approximately less than $150,000 to be able to receive, in the event of a catastrophe impacting Barbados, relief from the Catastrophe Fund. And that fund was initially set up, sir. It was financed initially from monies put in by the government. But certainly, sir, as we all are aware, once you are unemployed or self-employed, sir, contributions of 0.1% of your insurable earnings, sir, since inception, would have contributed to developing the Catastrophe Fund. And the truth is, sir, the fund developed over the years and has reached a point now where there is a sizable amount of monies in the fund, approximately $50-something million in the fund at the moment. However, sir, and let me just give a little more perspective, because you would recall, sir, that just before we came to office, there was talk, and this is probably 2.5 years ago now, sir, approximately. There was talk about abolishing the Catastrophe Fund. As you are well aware, the economic circumstances facing this country prior to us taking office, there was some contemplation by the previous administration that they were going to abolish the Catastrophe Fund and use the monies in the Catastrophe Fund at that time to be able to help finance government's operations. And as a party in opposition, we rightly said then that it was not the proper use for those funds, because you would have left, sir, persons exposed in the event that a catastrophe or something would have struck Barbados and had a significant impact, certainly not just on the economy, but on the livelihoods of Barbadians. And we still believe, sir, that that was the right argument to make at that time. Now, having come to office, sir, and this is very important, because context, sir, is critical, so that when I know I've heard in the calling programs, I've heard on social media, I've heard all kinds of things. But the reality is, sir, when we came to office, one of the first things that we did, sir, was announce a comprehensive debt restructuring for this country. And in successfully executing that debt restructuring, sir, we included in the new bonds that were issued the natural disaster clause. And you will recognize, sir, that in so doing, we felt that it was important that if a natural disaster impacted Barbados, that rather than have a disorderly default with respect to debt, that it made sense to ensure that the country and the government had the space to be able to respond and to rebuild the country as required. And this, sir, was in the context of seeing what happened in Dominica, what happened certainly in Bahamas just last year, sir, and all of the other tropical storms, as we recognize, sir, that we have been seeing a significant increase in the number of Category 5 hurricanes coming through the region. And therefore, we designed the debt restructuring to put us in a position that if Barbados happened to be impacted significantly, sir, by a tropical storm, a hurricane, what have you, that created mass devastation in the country, that rather than having to be forced to continue to service debt, that we could use the debt payments to actually rebuild, sir, the economy faster. Now, having done that, sir, and it's important to understand the principle behind that, because when St. Kitts in the early 2000s, sir, had their first hurricane, they borrowed, sir, to rebuild. And as they were rebuilding, 2 years later, sir, in the midst of trying to come back, the second hurricane hit. And St. Kitts, sir, we saw what happened to St. Kitts in terms of its ability to, one, first maintain payments on the first loan, but then having to go back to the market again, sir, in the midst of the hurricane, to be able then to obviously borrow again. And therefore, St. Kitts in the first decade of the 21st century would have gone through quite a turbulent period economically because of those two hurricanes that would have impacted St. Kitts significantly. And we saw the trajectory with respect to St. Kitts' debt profile. And so having come to office faced with significant financial troubles, we recognized that we needed to ensure that we gave Barbados the best opportunity, sir, to be able to build back an environment and give ourselves enough room to be capable, sir, of coming out and recovering much faster without necessarily compromising the overall debt situation. Because you don't want to be in a situation, sir, where you have to choose between saving lives and paying debt. And therefore, the introduction of the natural disaster clauses in our new debt instruments provides an opportunity where for 2 years we'll be able to suspend certainly the principal payments, and we will capitalize the interest, sir, such that any debt payments that would fall within that 2-year period, sir, would be suspended, giving the government access to those resources to be able to help fast-track the recovery effort outside of any other activity that we may be able to do. And so, sir, in that context, notwithstanding the fact that the Catastrophe Fund is still ongoing, and it is important too, sir, and we must admit, sir, that when, and certainly just at the end of last year, when we issued when we concluded the external debt, in the contemplation of the natural disaster clauses, sir, at that stage, we never envisaged a global pandemic, sir, that will cripple the world economy, such that we will see no commercial air traffic, sir, coming into the country in the way that we know, in the region that we know, sir. And so it is something that we will have to review for future debt issuance. But the reality is, sir, that this global pandemic is perhaps, sir, the most natural disaster that has ever happened to mankind. And was in our original contemplation, we focused solely on the risks that we saw every year. And you know, sir, yesterday was the start of the hurricane season. And it is instructive, sir, that the first tropical storm, his name was Arthur. But what was more important, sir, is that we already had 2 tropical storms before reaching landfall, before the start of the official hurricane season. And as the forecast for this season is to be much more active than we've seen before, it is important that we take stock of the resources that we do have. And as we seek to respond to the pandemic, sir, the government has been conscious of the fact that we have to ensure that the country is prepared with respect to the hurricane season, because we know, sir, that somewhere along the line, there will be some tropical storm, there will be some hurricane somewhere, sir, not just may impact Barbados, but may impact one of our neighbors at the very time, sir, where we are all truly vulnerable, because we have all experienced a significant reduction in activity this year, and therefore our ability to respond and help each other will be even more critical at this stage, because in this season, sir, we really have to ensure that not just that as Barbadians we are prepared, but we really got to help others to become as prepared as possible, because we rely on them, they rely on us, and I think that in this environment, sir, we have to be very, very, very conscious of that reality. But having said that, sir, the restructured bonds would provide, in any given year on average, and I want to just provide the perspective as to when we start to repay after the initial 4-year grace period, sir. When we start to repay our debt in full, which means both principal and interest, sir, on average, you'll be talking about almost $1 billion every year, potentially, with respect to relief that we could use in the event that there was a natural disaster. So we are not asking for a natural disaster to strike Barbados. That is not what we are saying. We are giving ourselves, through the structure that we have set up, sir, access to those monies that can be used to help rebuild Barbados if there's a natural disaster of the nature that we are normally associated with in our minds, to be able to help jumpstart the economy and move forward. So the Catastrophe Fund, as its current size of about $50-something million, sir, in the scheme of things, relatively speaking, is minuscule compared to the amount of money that we will have available to us in the event that there is a natural disaster. So I want to make it clear to you, to the country, sir, through you, that what we are doing here today is not in any way to disadvantage any person in the country, sir. It is not in any way, sir, to take away from the fact that we will still continue, sir, to build the Catastrophe Fund, sir. And for the very reasons that we are making these amendments today is because we need now to ensure, sir, that as much as possible, that as many businesses can survive in this country, sir, that will continue to employ persons, sir, especially in an environment where we have, up until last Friday, sir, 42,797 claims for unemployment, sir. 42,797 claims for unemployment. Now, if you appreciate, sir, that our workforce is on average about 145,000 people, sir, then Barbadians will come to understand, and whilst today is not the discussion for boss, Barbadians will now have to come to understand, sir, why it is, sir, we have to re-engineer what we have in order to ensure that those 42,000, almost 43,000 claims for unemployment, that we can get as many of those persons back to some form of work as soon as possible, sir, so that we can create some new balance for economic activity over the next 9 months, 12 months, sir. Because it is important for the functioning of our society, and sir, if nothing else, when certain persons used to speak about Barbados is more than an economy, it's a society, then you will truly understand that in the context, sir, of 43,000 claims for unemployment, that there's really little difference, sir, between the two. And therefore, what we are seeking to do, sir, despite all of the calls to say no to this and no to that, and the reality is, sir, our job as the government, sir, is to respond and to be innovative to the times. And we are doing so conscious, sir, that those persons who now find themselves unemployed, not because of anything that anybody in this room or in this country would have done, sir, but complete external circumstances has meant, sir, that our effectively, once we have remained open to the world pretty much is closed, sir. And Barbados now has to navigate its way through a very critical time. And the way that we respond to ensure that we can have as much domestic activity, sir, is absolutely critical in order to ensure that we can maintain a level of social stability that we have all become accustomed to, and that we all value. And so we don't come to these decisions lightly, sir. We are the government. The people elected us 2 years ago to make decisions on their behalf. But in making those decisions on their behalf, sir, we have gone the length and breadth of the country as we did when we were in opposition. And we have continued to do it in government, sir, to actively engage, sir, the people through their various representatives and the people themselves, to ensure that we explain what it is we are doing, why we are doing it, and well, sir, at some stage, some people may agree, some people may disagree with what the decisions are, but the reality says that we have to move forward with absolute singular purpose. And our mission, sir, is to ensure that as many people can keep their heads above water, sir, in this country, at a very critical time where the government finds itself under tremendous pressure because the revenues, sir, because of the timing, too, of the impact of COVID-19, has meant that we have not been able to generate enough surpluses early enough in the financial year that at least will help us to move forward. So we're effectively in a position, sir, where we have to manage this process through and be as clear to the public as we can, whilst asking people to recognize that those almost 43,000 claims for unemployment, sir, and it's a situation, sir, that is quite extraordinary. And there is pressure on the national insurance because you would appreciate, sir, that with 43,000 claims for unemployment, that means, sir, that there are 43,000 potentially less persons who are making contributions who would ordinarily be making contributions to the NAS. And if you can imagine, sir, the unemployment fund obviously will be under pressure. And therefore, the government of Barbados has a fiduciary responsibility to provide the appropriate funds to be able to pay those persons their unemployment once it becomes due. And therefore, it is not an easy experience, certainly for those persons having to adjust. As the government, we have to respond to the very immediate needs of persons that we have already put critical measures in place to deal with that. And therefore, I say it to Barbadians through you, sir, that yes, the next few months, the next year will be tough. But we have crafted a response that is as inclusive as it can be in the circumstances. And whilst I know that some people may wish to criticize and all of that, and they're happy, they're free, sir, to criticize. But at the end of the day, our mission is to ensure that ordinary Barbadians can keep their heads above water. And there are myriad of ways, sir, that can happen, and therefore we want to be in a position to help accelerate, sir, and ensure that people can have some measure of choice. It may not be the wide set of choices that you would have under normal circumstances, but at least you have an opportunity to be able to move forward. And that's part of the reason, sir, why we're here today with respect to this bill. Now, I say all of that, sir, to say that if we have a catastrophe fund with monies in it, we have, on the one hand, sir, businesses that in an environment like COVID-19, sir, we are now, because of uncertainty, and it's important to understand that in this environment, the human psyche changes. And people then start focusing on survival. But an economy cannot run on survival, you know, sir. Because whilst we have seen over the last 2 months, sir, more activity at supermarkets than perhaps we probably would see under normal circumstances, the reality is that what people are purchasing would have been purchased in the supermarkets, and I'm not making any excuses for anybody, but this is just the reality. The margins based on the product of the products that are being purchased in the supermarket, sir, would have been, for the most part, allowing people to survive. But those items, sir, are not generally the items that will make money for the enterprise. It costs to provide those things. And therefore, whilst we have seen a lot of activity at supermarkets, that does not translate necessarily into supermarkets making money. And I'm making that point to say, sir, broadly speaking, that unless we get people to a stage in this country, sir, where they are comfortable about their future, that we can see a slight shift in expansion from essentials to some other optional type of expenditure that allows other people to earn money, then we will find ourselves in a situation, sir, where the economy / society, sir, will have some real friction. And the reality is that our response in terms of building out a response to this real catastrophe called COVID-19 is rooted in getting as many people, no matter what profession they're engaged in, to be earning, which means we have to reorient ourselves slightly, sir, away from that. But I accept, sir, that in the short term, people have to survive. And that survival is rooted in the incomes that they have coming in on a week, and the incomes coming into the households such that they can make those decisions. But we cannot stay, sir, marking time. The country cannot just simply mark time. We have to provide opportunities for as many businesses, as much business activity outside of that essential expenditure in order for us to be able to move forward. And therefore, we have seen, sir, and I want to, at this stage, I know that the the member for the city has been at work tirelessly 24 hours, and his staff, sir, within the Ministry of Health and Wellness, sir, have been at work to ensure that we get the containment right. And we've seen over the course of the last few weeks a reopening of certain aspects of the economy, sir, to match the reality with respect to the medical response. And therefore, whilst I am happy that on the way here, sir, I saw a lot of traffic on the road, because that means they will get some, unfortunately, some fuel tax. But the reality is, sir, unless we get the economy starting to turn again, sir, and it means every aspect. So it's not, I'm not making this, this is a very serious consideration, because unless we get things turning again, sir, beyond just the essential expenditures that we were making over the last 2 months, then it means that we will not have had the opportunity, sir, to ensure that we maintain that social stability that we all value in this country. So it is critical how we use what we have now, with that in mind, knowing, sir, that what we are seeing happening in the north, sir, has the potential, sir, to delay our recovery, the recovery in the region. And I made no bones about it. We all know, sir, that the first Tuesday in November will mark a significant day in the management of this whole thing. And the reality is that the Caribbean and Barbados, by extension, relying on tourism, relying on flows. We also do business up and down the region, sir. In a previous life, I used to do some consulting up and down the region, sir, and as most Barbadian companies and individuals do. And therefore, unless we find a way, and yes, some of it can be done remotely, which is fine, but the reality of the situation is that we all know, sir, and if we're honest with ourselves, if you go to London, if you go to Paris, if you go to New York, if you go to Berlin, you go to Los Angeles, any of the major metropolitan cities, sir, the thing that drives the economies of those cities, sir, tourism. Tourism. And people going and coming is what keeps those economies taking over, and we are no different. And therefore, until such time as they can get themselves organized, then we have to ensure that we work together domestically as well as with our regional partners to create as much activity as we can for ourselves until such time as the rest of the world figures out how to handle their own business. But November is a critical marker, sir, with respect to how the whole world will move forward out of this. But we can't wait until November. That's the reality. And therefore, part of our response, sir, is to ensure that we can re-engineer what we have to provide our businesses to survive first, survive, and come out the back end, sir, of the next 9 to 12 months, sir, potentially 18 months. It is going to be tough. But come out the back end, sir, ready to be able to take on the world again. But we first have to get these businesses to a point where they can survive. And we have announced a number of measures already, which is already in train. But we want to do more. But we can only do more, sir, if we get the economy taking over, such that we get flows, not just of revenue, but flows going through businesses, cash flow going through businesses that can pay their workers, sir, even though businesses have to make operational adjustments with respect to what they're doing. But it is the flows that are important, sir, to keeping businesses alive. And therefore, in responding to that, is part of why we would have come to the chamber today with respect to the Catastrophe Fund. And it's important to note, sir, that in Clause 2 of the bill, we have introduced a new definition of catastrophe, which, and I will read for the benefit of not just the chamber, but for those listening, that catastrophe means an event, whether natural or not, that has a significant adverse impact on the economy or a part of the economy, including a fire, an earthquake, a storm, a hurricane, a storm surge, a sea surge, flooding, lightning, or another force of nature. B, sir, it says a pandemic. C, sir, it says a breach of cybersecurity. And D, sir, an act of terrorism. Now, sir, the broadening of this definition, sir, now really takes into account, sir, anything that is perceived to have a significant impact on the national economy would be covered, sir, with respect to being able to deliver some relief from the Catastrophe Fund. And therefore, it's important that we recognize that in the 21st century, certainly, whilst we are focusing on a pandemic at the moment, there are other events that could potentially impact us, which we've sought to cover in here in the event that any of these things may have an impact on Barbados going forward. But it's critical from that definitional point of view so that we cover ourselves so that we know what will have access with respect to this. And we have also indicated, sir, that not only will we keep the original contemplation with respect to those persons who formerly would not have had insurance coverage, we have also indicated as well, sir, that the qualifying businesses, as set out certainly in the schedule, would now be able, sir, to have access to the monies from the Catastrophe Fund to be able to keep them afloat. And the truth is, sir, these are extraordinary circumstances. Extraordinary. And in any way, let me just say, sir, this does not in any way, sir, crowd out any of the actions that are being taken by the private financial institutions with respect to the provision of cash flow. But the reality of the circumstances is that in this kind of environment, sir, government has to play a much larger role, but we have to do so in a smarter way as possible. And we are seeking to do that by being able to ensure that we can respond to two specific instances using the monies from the Catastrophe Fund, and I will get into that a little further. But the reality is, sir, we have to use what we have. And we have to use what we have in a creative way in order to ensure that we can get as much business activity, which then helps to reduce as much as possible, sir, that 43,000 claims, almost 43,000 claims for unemployment that we have seen so far. And the truth is, sir, it is going to be extraordinary because even as we reopen, and we've seen already companies having to take decisions, because in an environment where there is no income, sir, it is almost impossible to maintain the kind of expenditure that you are seeing that you would ordinarily be committed to. And therefore, businesses have had to take decisions operationally in terms of the way forward. And therefore, it is important that as we reopen responsibly, and we are doing so in a phased way, that we can do, as much e-commerce as possible, because if you can do as much e-commerce, then that helps, obviously, for you to focus on delivering the service as opposed to having to deal with persons in face-to-face, potentially helping to reduce your cost of operations. And that's why it's important, and I urge the entire business community that this is the time now really to get fully into the 21st century with respect to your practices. Because the things that we have been accustomed doing, sir, actually cost us a lot more to do. And if we were in a position where we can just relook our processes in the same way that government has been, ministry by ministry and department has been looking at how we deliver services to the public, that business people now have to do the same type of analysis in order to help reduce the cost of their operations. But having said that, sir, we have a responsibility as a government to ensure that we get, as far as possible, the balance with respect to being able to have as much economic activity taking place as we can to be able to lift and keep everybody going forward. And the environment is challenging. This is just one part of our response, sir, to that very challenging environment. And we are not going to throw up our hands, sir, and say that we can't get it done. We're going to keep working, sir, day and night, as we have all been working, certainly since May 25th of 2018. I have heard calls, sir, in certain spaces as it relates to the size of the cabinet, sir, and all of these things, sir. And the truth is, and I reiterate here again, sir, the country has to judge the government on the basis of its performance, sir. And in this environment, if we don't have many hands, sir, lifting, then we will find ourselves, sir, with almost 1/3, sir, of the workforce. Almost 1/3 of the workforce out of work, sir. I cannot imagine how we can move forward if we don't have as many hands at the table, sir, to be able to help lift this load. And therefore, it is important that the country focuses on what is required to done to get everybody out of this hole, rather than focusing on who they think, sir, should be tossed aside. And it is important, sir, to understand that the government's response is to keep every single Barbadian household, sir, afloat during this time, so that we can all come out of this together. And the reality is, sir, that it is going to be difficult. And we have crafted responses to be able to allow us at least a little space to be able to respond to the increased demand for government services, as you can appreciate, sir, would happen at this time. And so, sir, Clause 3 just gives the background in terms of how the fund was set up. Before, the purpose of the fund, sir, at Clause 4, is to provide financial aid to eligible persons and qualifying businesses, sir, in need of such aid as a result of a catastrophe, as redefined before. The claim, sir, for financial aid, and it speaks to at Clause 5, a person described in the first schedule, and you would note, sir, that the first schedule is pretty much the same as the previous one in the context of the persons that will get the relief in terms of what was contemplated under the scenario of natural disasters causing physical damage to the country. Clause 6, sir, and this is where we have made some changes, because in the previous contemplation survey, it was purely about physical damage to the economy and that assessment. We've decided, sir, that we will create two committees, one that will focus on the physical catastrophes and one that will focus on the economic catastrophes, which are outlined in the second schedule. And I'll come to that, sir, a little later. The management of the fund, sir, at Clause 7 speaks to the National Insurance Board obviously being responsible for the management of the fund, which we all know, and as to what's set out there. Clause 8, sir, speaks to the accounting function in terms of the Director of National Insurance having the responsibility for keeping the proper accounts of the fund and recording, obviously, any specific transactions there too. Clause 9 speaks to reports, which is as standard. Clause 10, laying of reports. Clause 11, sir, the offences with respect to persons that may seek to obtain financial aid under false pretenses or giving incomplete information or with respect to that. And clause 12 gives the minister may make regulations providing for the management of the fund, B, providing for the manner in which claims may be made, and C, generally for the proper administration of this act. And of course, sir, clause 13 is the amendment to the schedule, and 14, sir, speaks to the repeal of the existing bill. So let me just, sir, go to the first schedule and come to the disruption of, the first schedule speaks to the destruction of homes by catastrophe, which, as I said, sir, would have been the previous contemplation or the existing contemplation under the Catastrophe Fund Act. And therefore, nothing has changed with respect to the fact that if there was a hurricane or a fire or earthquake or any of that, that persons can still claim financial aid from the Catastrophe Fund in this manner. And so therefore, nothing has changed with respect to that. So the original intent for the Catastrophe Fund still remains for those persons who may experience property damage or destruction of property with respect to a natural disaster. So that, and just for clarity, sir, it says a owner of a chattel house valued at not more than $150,000, sir, who occupies the house and who earns less than $25,000 annually is from the 1st of April 2008, actually, sir, entitled to a grant in such amount as is determined by the Physical Catastrophes Committee. And it goes on, sir, to speak to whether the house is constructed with wood and brick and a whole set of other things that are there, sir. And so nothing has changed with respect to that. What we have changed, sir, is at clause 2 of the first schedule, and it relates now to the disruption of business by a pandemic and related containment measures. And therefore, sir, this is where now we are making provision for, as we have already announced, sir, and indicated that there are two things. There are self-employed persons, sir, who have been making contributions to the national insurance. And in these circumstances, sir, if persons have had to be laid off as employees, they would have gone to the national insurance scheme and are, in fact, will receive unemployment benefits. Now, sir, under normal circumstances, as a self-employed person, you know, you make your contributions to pension and sickness. There is no obviously in the scheme of things, and for lack of a better phrase, as a self-employed person, you can determine when you work or not, and therefore you would not have access to unemployment in the same way as an employee would. And therefore, what is contemplated here as the business owner, essentially, as the self-employed person, having made contributions to the National Insurance Fund, is that the pandemic obviously would have created a situation where, as a self-employed person, your business would have been impacted, and whilst you may have employees, maybe 2, maybe 3, whatever, that you may have had to lay off. There's no income coming into the business. Those employees would have gone to the NAS, because as a self-employed person making NAS contributions, you would have been paying NAS for your employees. And those employees will get the unemployment benefit, but there's nothing particularly for the self-employed person, because there's a loss of activity, there's no ability to make any money. And therefore we have crafted, sir, a business interruption benefit for self-employed persons, just taking into account the fact, sir, that those persons, having been self-employed, not being able to earn in a pandemic, that this benefit now will be there for them as a temporary benefit, because as you can see, sir, we are reopening the economy now, and therefore it is to take cognizance of the fact that that is the case with respect to self-employed persons. But it is important, sir, to appreciate that And we want to, at this stage, sir, continue to urge all Barbadians, sir, all Barbadians, of a couple of things. One, sir, do not assume that people, and I say this, sir, without any malice, it is the responsibility of every citizen, sir, to check and to verify that any statutory obligations that are being taken from your salary, sir, is actually being deposited at the appropriate institutions. Over the course of the last few weeks, sir, as I've been doing tax clinics, sir, online, I've had to say to ask persons participating, can you confirm that this money that is shown here at the Revenue Authority as in your account, that you actually earned it? And the reality is, sir, is that we have all taken things for granted that once the payroll slip is done and they send you the payroll, sir, and it goes to the bank and all of that, we all take it for granted. But the reality is, sir, is that we all have to take just a little time to verify that if somebody has taken monies from my pay and said that it has gone to the BRA and said that it has gone to NIS, it is really still your responsibility to check and verify that it is so. Because it is at these very times, sir, when people may be expecting to receive a benefit, only them to realize that no monies were deposited into your account for some time. And I think that it is important, sir, that as employers and employees be responsible in managing this going forward. And therefore, employees cannot simply absolve themselves of the responsibility of checking periodically to ensure that their accounts are up to date. If you have an issue, then obviously I know that there's a process for compliance with the NIS, and I know that certainly it is not in keeping with good labor relations practice to deduct monies from people's pay and not put it into either the national insurance or the BRA with respect to those things. So it's something that is important, sir, that we recognize that as a society, we have a responsibility to each other. We have a responsibility to ourselves. But I want to urge those self-employed persons, as well as those employers who would have submitted the schedules, but not necessarily the monies, that we understand that in this environment where we want to maintain as much jobs as possible, that we have to find a workable solution that allows for people's contributions to be made, for businesses to be compliant, and that we can get as many self-employed people compliant with their national insurance contributions, such that if any of this is to ever happen again, that people would be clear as to what it is they will be eligible for. And I will get into that a little further. But at Clause 2, sir, in the first schedule, it speaks to the disruption of business by a pandemic and related containment measures. And it says, a person who is registered under the Value-Added Tax Act, Cap 87, B, pays value-added tax, and C, can show that his cash flow has been severely disrupted by a pandemic and the measures taken to contain the pandemic. Is entitled to claim financial aid and in such amount and on such terms as is determined by the Economic Catastrophe Committee, which I will come to next. 2, a self-employed person who makes national insurance contributions and who can say that his cash flow has been severely disrupted by a pandemic and the measures taken to contain the pandemic, is entitled to claim financial aid in such amount and on such terms as determined by the Economic Catastrophe Committee. And that is important, sir, in the context of what we are seeking to do, because as you would be aware, sir, we have established a Vat Loan Fund, which is to help to finance, sir, those businesses who are registered for VAT, and therefore allowing them the capacity to borrow from the Catastrophe Fund as administered by the Barbados Revenue Authority. An interest-free loan, because as you would appreciate, sir, in this environment, we want to keep as many businesses open. But the loan has to be paid back, sir, over the course of a year. So let me just assure the public through you, sir, that what is contemplated here with respect to the businesses that may benefit from this is the repayment of whatever it is you borrow from the fund over the course of a year. Whilst it is interest-free, because you would appreciate, sir, that we have built up a catastrophe fund. And therefore, we are not taking the money, sir, and just giving it away. We have put some measures in place to improve the cash flow for businesses. The cash flow for businesses, outside of any other mechanism that they may employ, either from the bank, finance, house, whatever, to be able to ensure that we can keep as many businesses afloat as possible. Now, whilst it is not here, I would remind the Chamber that we have also, for a number of small businesses, provided through Fund Access, the ability to have some wage support for up to 5 employees of $500 a month for 3 months, which allow them to be able to keep their employees there. And therefore, that is something that the government will undertake through Fund Access. But all we're saying is we're trying to have a multi-pronged approach to being able to respond in this way. Because as I said, sir, we need to get as much activity and much flow in the economy as possible so that we can move forward, sir, with a little more certainty. And that is why, sir, it is important that we re-engineer what we have. So the monies coming from the Catastrophe Fund that persons may access will be paid back, and therefore replenish the fund, whilst the rest of us will continue to on a monthly basis, who are still employed, sir, will still continue to pay the 0.1% of our insurable earnings towards the fund. So this is not in any way, sir, to be seen as just we're just taking the money, and as I heard somebody say that the government giving money to corporate entities and all kinds of other irresponsible statements. Because if you would take the time to read, sir, you would appreciate what the government is trying to do. Because whilst one can interpret things as you want, facts are the facts. It is an interest-free loan from the Catastrophe Fund, administered through the BRA from this committee, to allow for greater cash flow for businesses that can keep as many businesses going as possible, so that we can get as many of those 43,000 claims for unemployment down, sir. And this is in conjunction to a whole host of other things that the government will be contemplating in order to move everybody forward. So when people get up and say, sir, that the government gave away money to corporate interests, it is grossly false. And some people in this chamber knows that it is grossly false, but allows people to go out there and say to the public that the government is giving away money to corporate interests. But having said that, sir, we will continue to focus on what is required to create stability, sir, for this country. There will come a time, sir, when we can have the discussion about boss. And when it comes to that, sir, we will reiterate the same thing, because some people can't see what's in front of them. But the government's responsibility, sir, is to ignore those cries, focus on channeling and getting everybody focused, sir, on what the solution is. And this government will continue to work and engage the stakeholders, those who are impacted, to be able to ensure that we get the right response. Because I can guarantee you, sir, I can guarantee you that every public servant either has some family, some friend, somebody that's go to church with them, sir, somebody that live in the neighborhood that is one of those 43,000 claims for unemployment. And it is still going up, sir. It is still going up. And therefore, in the context of trying to save Barbados and maintain a social compact, sir, between your friend, your family, your neighbor, the body you go to church with, sir, we are all in this together. And if we are not in it together, sir, and allowing the government to be creative in responding to the circumstance, because other people have different ways of doing things, but that's their thing. Because we know, sir, what the recommendations were to this government about sending home 5,000 and 6,000 and 7,000 people. And we have said no, that we will continue, sir, to look and spend the time, sir, focusing on how we can solve the problems rather than throwing people under the bus, literally, because they can't think, sir, beyond what somebody puts in front of them at any given time. But that's a subject for another debate, sir. The second schedule, sir, speaks to the committees, and I just want to go through that very quickly because the two committees, sir, being constituted. So in the first one, sir, the Physical Catastrophes Committee will comprise the Chief Executive Officer for the Financial Services Commission, or his nominee, Director of National Insurance, or nominee, Chief Fire Officer, or his nominee, and the Director of Emergency Management and his nominee are two persons appointed by the Minister by instrument in writing. Now, the reason for the composition here, sir, is because obviously in the event of a natural disaster where there have to be assessment of damage and those kinds of things which are pretty much of a general insurance nature, loss provision and those kinds of things, sir, for physical assessments is the reason why the composition of the committee is the way it is there in that context. And the Financial Services Commission provides the backstop by way of the loss adjustment and that general insurance component. Committee number 2, sir, which speaks to the broad economic catastrophe committee, which we are contemplating for addressing these kinds of circumstances. We have the Revenue Commissioner of the BRA or his nominee, again, Director of National Insurance, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, our nominee, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce, our nominee, and two persons appointed by the Minister. And the truth is, sir, we are doing this because, as we have said from the beginning, sir, whilst the circumstances will befall us, sir, we want to ensure that we have the legal framework up and running so that the things that we are doing, sir, that there's no long lag between when we say we want to implement something as we had to do facing this pandemic and having the legislative framework to be able to have the authority to do it. So we've crafted this second committee to focus on that because the truth be told, sir, as was in the previous bill, the Chief Fire Officer really would not be appropriately deployed for assessing claims of a business nature or the Director of the Department of Emergency Management. And therefore, again, you have to comprise these committees, if you like, sir, to be able to deal with the particular problems that come to hand. And that is important, sir, so that you don't have, there's that old saying, sir, I'm not suggesting, there is that old saying of square pegs and round holes. I'm not saying that the Chief Fire Officer is a square peg. I'm just saying that his peg is to deal with the physical disasters and the damage that will come in that assessment, whilst for this purpose of the economic catastrophes, that we have people that will have the expertise and focus on that. And therefore, it's important that we create the committees that are fit for purpose, such that they can get on with the work. But the truth is, sir, this is important because given that there will be no relief from debt because of the pandemic, our ability to put some monies into the system creatively at the very time, sir, that our fiscal circumstances are a little uncertain, and a little uncertain only in the context that with the halt of tourism and other related activity. And whilst we know that in the scheme of things in terms of how our taxes are generated, and given that we all know that tourism, for example, but just by way of example, we all know that from inception, tourism always had half the VAT rate, and therefore would not necessarily contribute by way of VAT revenue the same as the rest of the economy. But the point is, it's still a part of the economy. We knew that the structure of a number of these tourism entities, in terms of the concessions that were given, never really paid in terms of corporation tax a whole lot to corporation tax. But the reality is that a whole set of income tax on behalf of the workers would come in to the Treasury. And obviously the workers spending in the economy would then add to VAT coming back into the economy. So therefore, the reality is that whilst, depending on where you look, the impact in terms of the cessation of tourism and related activities would have an impact on revenue, our ability now to ensure that the rest of the economy can continue is critical. And therefore, with those types of conditions, it is important that we get as much activity going as quickly as possible in the economy, such that we can get the country moving forward. And it is instructive, sir, that, and I just want to indicate, sir, that the persons who will benefit from this, they can go to the Barbados Revenue Authority's website, www.bra.gov.bb, and they can complete the form, and the form can be sent to Loan Fund at bra.gov.bb. And therefore, of course, naturally, you will have to provide some kind of financial statements, income year 2018-19, inclusive of cash flow statements. And the truth is, sir, any business that is operating would have to have cash flow statements. I mean, I don't know how you would be operating if you don't know your cash flow. So these are things that should not be onerous on a business that is registered for VAT, because you should have your cash flows there to show how you've been impacted by the pandemic. As I said, sir, the interest-free loan is repayable over 12 months in equal monthly installments, and will be commencing no later than November 29th. And therefore, our push to get activity now is to get the economy in a stage where people then can potentially start paying back as we get things unfolding. And therefore, this is critical so that we can get as much monies back into the economy. And I just want to indicate that on top of these things, sir, we have been accelerating the payment of those refunds, which will go back, and I will speak to that a little later. Now, sir, as it relates to the self-employed persons, in terms of the business interruption benefit, let me just indicate, sir, that the period for consideration in terms of is 2019. So, so therefore, self-employed persons would have had to have made payments in 2019. And let me just clarify further. Self-employed persons must have paid contributions for at least, sir, 2 quarters of 2019. Okay? And those payments would have had to have been made by April 27th. So what we're talking about here, sir, is that for persons, when the pandemic hit, and I know it because normally, and just by way of explanation, self-employed persons normally would pay at the end of they pay on a quarterly basis at the end, the 15th of the month. And so, unlike employees where you get monthly deductions, they normally would pay a quarter's worth of contributions at any given time, so 4 times a year. So once you've made 2 quarters for 2019 payments, should be fine. Self-employed persons, sir, who registered with the National Insurance Office after the 2nd quarter of 2019 must have paid contributions for at least 1 quarter of 2019 by April 27th, and that obviously would have gone already. Persons in receipt of any form of pension, sir, from the NIS obviously will not be eligible for the thing. So there are a couple of things. There are persons who may be, which I've personally made a representation to me personally on it, pensioners who are working. They are self-employed. But of course, sir, if you are self-employed, technically in the context that you're working in that type of arrangement. But if you're already a pensioner, you're not making any further contributions to the fund. So therefore, if you're not making any further contributions to the fund, you're not technically self-employed, you just happen to be working pretty much on the side in that arrangement. So for those persons who are already getting pensions, who may be working in a self-employed capacity, obviously you would not have been making any further contributions to the National Insurance Fund. And then it says here, sir, so if you go to the NAS website, sir, you will get further details on it, www.nas.gov.bb, and the form can be downloaded from there, sir, and once you complete it, you can scan and email it back to self-employed.queries@bginas.gov.bb. And so, sir, I urge all businesses, all self-employed persons, between the NAS and the BRA, I know, sir, they're under pressure. And I want to say at this point, I know that it has been an extraordinary effort to respond to those 42,000, almost 43,000 claims for unemployment. I can say to the public that the staff at the National Insurance Scheme, sir, have been working to try to ensure that they can respond as quickly as possible. The reality is, sir, is that if we, and I take this opportunity again for both the BRA and the NAS to encourage persons to submit their bank information so that the payments can be made directly into your bank or credit union, bank or credit union information, because that helps to speed up the process. Because if you can imagine us trying to print 43,000 checks every 3 weeks, the time it takes to print, the time it takes to put in the envelope, the time it takes for the postman to get to you, that is time. And therefore, I urge everybody to kindly submit their bank or credit union information in order to allow for this process to be as seamless as possible given the circumstances. And if we all do that, then we help to diminish a lot of the anxiety that is out there. So I say to the staff of both the BRA and the NAS that we have been pushing to respond to people's needs, that you continue to do the work that you are doing. I know people are complaining about calling and ain't hearing the body, and it is, I understand the stress that we are all under. And I ask the public's patience, sir, because it is a trying time for everybody. And I know that they are working to respond to people. And whilst the level of response to calls and what have you is not the best, I do know that the staff of both institutions have been working to process those refunds in the case of the Barbados Revenue Authority, as well as dealing with the unemployment claims and other claims too, because let's not forget that there are other claims on the NAS as well. And I beg certainly the country's patience, sir, as whilst we've given more resources to the NAS to be able to manage this, it is really an extraordinary effort, sir, for